Welcome to the Master Reset Podcast, where we take you from where you are to where you want to be. Today I'm going to speak about activating the promises of God in your life. Now, the promises of God do not automatically manifest in your life. They need to be activated before they are manifested. It is God's will to manifest His promises in your life. If it wasn't His will, then He wouldn't have given you His promises. As I mentioned in an earlier podcast, the relationship between the will of God and the purpose of God can be compared to the relationship between a slave and a master. The will of God serves the purpose of God. In other words, you can only experience the will of God, which is the manifestation of His promises over your life, when you've come into complete heart alignment with the purpose of God. When you align your heart with the purpose of God, then only will the will of God be activated in your life. Then only will the promises of God be activated in your life. Now, there are numerous examples in the Bible where this principle was applied, but I'm going to zoom into Hannah. During Hannah's time, God's people experienced a deficiency of revelation of God's true nature. In fact, 1 Samuel chapter 3 from verse 1 says, "And the word of the Lord was rare in those days. There was no widespread revelation." The reason for this deficiency was due to the corruption in the priesthood of the day. Eli was the high priest at the time, and his two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, were serving as priests. Eli did not exercise discipline over his sons, and as a result, they dishonored and blasphemed the Lord. And this is found in 1 Samuel chapter 3, from verse 11 to 13. Hophni and Phinehas broke priestly protocol and treated the Lord's offering with contempt. They also had sex with a woman who served at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Their condition was well known among the people, and consequently, God's name was misrepresented. In light of this, it was God's intent to raise up a person who would fulfill a dual function of prophet and judge, or priest and ruler. God's purpose for doing this was to accurately represent His nature and character through this person. And the person that God chose to fulfill this role was Samuel. In order for this purpose to be accomplished, the woman who would give birth to Samuel, along with her husband, needed to be willing to give Samuel back to God, to be set apart for God's will and purpose for the rest of his life. This would not be an easy decision to make for any parent, but God foreknew, because He knows the end from the beginning, that Hannah would be the person who would be willing to give Samuel back to Him. In view of this, God chose Hannah to be Samuel's mother. 1 Samuel chapter 1 records that Hannah had a passionate desire to have children, but she was barren. Why didn't Hannah just accept the reality that she couldn't have children? Since we have the benefit of hindsight, we know that desire in Hannah to have children came from God. When I meditated on this, the following question came to me. Why would God give Hannah the desire to have children, but close her womb? At first glance, that didn't make sense to me. But on deeper reflection, however, it makes perfect sense. God plants desires in our hearts that are in alignment with His purposes. The Apostle Paul says it this way, "For it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill His good purpose," in Philippians chapter 2 verse 13. As I stated earlier, when you come into alignment with the purpose of God, then the will of God gets activated. What was the will of God for Hannah? Once again, in hindsight, we know that it was God's will for Hannah to have children. Why? Hannah was chosen by God to be Samuel's mother. The reason why God closed Hannah's womb was to move her to the point where she would be willing to give Samuel back to Him. Hannah reached this point when she prayed the following prayer, and she made a vow saying, "Lord Almighty, if You will only look on Your servant's misery and remember me and not forget Your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him back to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head." This is found in 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 11. At that moment, Hannah came into heart alignment with the purpose of God, and as a result, God activated her womb. How do I know that Hannah's prayer was not vain words, but genuinely came from her heart? Scripture clearly states that Hannah was praying in her heart, and her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. By the way, Hannah's husband Elkanah was also in heart alignment with God's purpose regarding the lifelong vow of Samuel's dedication to the Lord. This was called the Nazirite vow, which is explained in detail in Numbers chapter 6 from verse 1 to 21. It was crucial for both Hannah and Elkanah to be in heart agreement with God's purpose. Oneness in a marriage is key to God's blessing. And in the course of time, Hannah became pregnant and gave birth to Samuel in 1 Samuel chapter 1 verse 20. After Samuel was weaned, Hannah fulfilled the vow and gave him to Eli, the high priest. Some of you have received a prophetic word over your life that God has confirmed to you in undeniable ways over a number of years. You are absolutely convinced that the prophetic word you received is in fact the will of God for your life, and you have a passionate desire to see it manifest. The only challenge you have is that it's been many years since you've originally received that word, but it hasn't manifested yet. In fact, you feel like its fulfillment is long overdue. In reality, some of you have become depressed about it. Hannah had a similar experience. In fact, in addition to being depressed, she refused to eat in 1 Samuel chapter 1 from verse 6 to 8. I would like to submit to you, like Hannah, perhaps your heart is not yet in full alignment with the purpose of God for giving you that prophetic word in the first place. If you don't know God's purpose for giving you that word, I want to encourage you to ask Him. He will answer you if you ask Him with a heart of faith. Once God reveals His purpose for giving that prophetic word to you, then sincerely align your heart with it. When you do this, I believe God's will, which is your prophetic word, which is the promises of God over your life, will be activated and come into full manifestation. Since God doesn't show partiality, if He did the impossible for Hannah, I have absolutely no doubt that He will do the same for you.